Well, good afternoon everybody. How y'all doing? Pretty good here, and welcome to the channel. You know, I was thinking, I lifted this truck recently, and what are the repercussions of doing so? You know, when you change the geometry or structure of any vehicle, you're gonna have things change. So what has changed since I lifted the Tacoma? If you lift your Tacoma, what can you expect? Well, the first thing obviously is the stance. I mean, it's obviously going to be higher. You guys can see that. I've got a little more distance between the wheel well and the tires, and of course between the ground and entering and exiting the cab. And that means you either are 6'7" or you're going to need some sort of a step if you want to get in and out comfortably. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't get in and out of the truck. You certainly can hoist your legs up there and get into the truck the way that it is, but it is going to be a little bit more difficult to get in and out of. Now, as far as the ride, you know, I've mentioned this a couple of times. The ride is going to be different. It's going to be stiffer, especially, well, I should preface that, if you go with a ready lift like what I went with, or a spacer block lift, because in essence what you're doing is you're putting spacers in above the springs and you're putting blocks in above the leaf springs in the back, and you're going to compact them a little bit. You're going to give them a little bit less distance to be able to absorb, if you will, the shock of bumps and things in the road. So you are going to have a little bit stiffer or firmer ride, I guess, than you would with just the OEM setup. And I have noticed that with mine. Now, that's probably a combination of the lift and the tires. Of course, I went with the Nitto Ridge Grapplers. These are the 295/55 R20s. Obviously more aggressive, wider tire than what the OEM setup is, so that's going to play in a little bit too. As far as any modifications to the truck, the only thing that I had to have done after the lift was to have the trim in the front here cut. They used to go more straight down here, if you will. I had to have them cut at an angle, which I think actually fits better with the line of the fender than it did before. So I kind of see that as an improvement myself. I certainly don't see that as a negative on this truck. And of course, had to be done on both sides. And that's just so that when you're turning, your tires obviously will clear the front air dam or plastic mud shield or whatever you want to call it. And that was the only modification that that my truck required anyway for this particular lift. Now, you guys can see that the truck is filthy dirty. And that is a good opportunity to take a look at the next thing that I considered here, and that is, what do those bigger, wider tires throw up behind them? Because obviously, whatever they throw up behind them is going to be hitting the body of the truck potentially. So let's take a look. And this is, like I said, a good time to look because there's a lot of mud and stuff on the truck, or a little bit rather, from the rain and stuff we've had here. So if we start in the front, obviously you're going to get stuff thrown back on the front fender and the fender flare. You can see here it's most concentrated in this area, and then of course disperses on back as you go. And you can see it down the side of the truck here. And then when we get to the back, obviously you're going to have the same thing. You can see a heavier concentration of mud and stuff here, and that's simply, you know, from the tires on the truck throwing things back. I will say it does get predominantly less as you go back just past that fender well. So this flare is catching most of that stuff. Go around to the other side just to see. It should be identical. Here, unfortunately, you can see my nice black exhaust tip is catching a lot of stuff coming off of the tires. As you would see, there's nothing in between. And then the fender flare here as well. And then it kind of lessens a little bit as you go back. Going down the sides, you can see the same thing here. Starts in the front, of course, and then disperses along the side of the truck. The most stuff being thrown right here on the front edge of the fender flare, which obviously makes perfect sense. Now, what's my point in that, I guess? Well, trying to decide in my case whether or not I should put mud flaps on this. You know, I'm not a big mud flap fan, but I suppose with the bigger, wider tires, and if you're concerned, probably should be put on to protect the paint on the sides of the truck, both behind the front and rear tires, because as you can see, obviously it's throwing up mud or muddy water on the sides of the truck and stuff. And if it's throwing those kind of things up just with light water, think what it's going to do if you're going through gravel or stone or rock or anything like that. Obviously, over time, it's going to continuously bombard the side of your truck and in essence blast the paint off. Also, on mine, it's going to be hitting the side steps, you can see here, which is not really a big deal, but it is hitting the side steps as well. So you need to take that into consideration as well. Probably should put some mud flaps on there to protect the truck. As far as handling goes, I've talked about that before. It is a little bit different. You get more road feel, I think, with the bigger tires, the bigger, wider tires on the truck. Just because there's more in contact with the road, so you're going to feel more. And I certainly have noticed that in this truck. Again, none of these things for me are a deterrent to lifting the truck. I do love the lifted look. I do love the meatier, bigger, wider tires on here, so it's nothing that I regret doing, and certainly nothing that I would change for just these, I'll say small, but I don't know that they're that small of reasons. But they are things that you need to be aware of if you are indeed going to lift the truck. The other thing, of course, is cost. You know, you can spend, I believe this whole setup for me, tires, wheels, everything included, was about $3,400. You can certainly spend a lot more than that if you go with a suspension lift or some of the other lifts out there, and there are tons, and people have opinions on every one of them. Which one's better, which one will give you a more factory ride, which one's smoother, blah, blah, blah. You could probably spend, I'm guessing, maybe upwards of 10 grand between the wheels, tires, and lift if you really wanted to. And that's probably if you don't get into the realm of adjustable lifts, like an air suspension, which would indeed require more parts and more cost and more labor. So those are some things to consider if you're gonna lift your truck. Specifically in my case, the Tacoma. I highly recommend it anyway. It just makes the truck look awesome, I think. It takes a truck, the best looking truck on the road, and makes it look even better. As usual, appreciate you guys watching. Please click that subscribe button if you haven't before. Don't forget, give this video a big thumbs up. Let me know what you think, and we'll see you next time on the web. Have a good day. Bye.